Hey everybody out there in Gracepoint land, we are back at it again. So glad to be able to join up one more time. Before we get started, would you just take a minute and share this devotional with your friends and your family, your circle of influence? We want to spread the word of Jesus all around the globe, and you're partnering with me to do that in our own little community, I guess. So anyway, you know what time it is. It's time for Grace Points. So spring is here, and spring brings new life. And what's fascinating to me about this particular season, let me backtrack a little bit. Down the street from my house, there's a tree. And somewhere during the winter time, I don't know if it was the snow or the wind, but it got hold of one of these low-hanging branches, and I mean, it snapped that thing so that the branch is literally broken and it is just hanging down. In fact, a couple of times people came to the house and they were parked on the street, and I went out to try and pull the branch the rest of the way off because it was just hanging, it was just dangling down into the street, but it wouldn't budge. I mean, the thing would not budge. It's hanging on by just a few fibers of wood, but it would not come off. So the other day, spring is here. I'm walking the dog with Maya. Maya's my daughter. We're walking the dog, we're coming back to the house, and I see this branch. Now the tree is in full bloom. Spring brings new life. But what's really fascinating to me is that in this tree with all these fresh new green leaves, this branch that's completely snapped and dangling and broken is blooming new leaves. Yeah, new leaves. I was fascinated. This tree right here was broken. It was snapped. And it's hanging down like this dangling dead limb. And on this branch that's barely hanging on, there are new leaves blooming. It's broken, but it's blooming. You know it's a whole word, right? John chapter 15 tells us in verse 5, "Yes, I am the vine, you are the branches. Those who remain in me and I in them will produce much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing." This message is so powerful for us today. And I just want to encourage you, because when I saw this branch and thought about all the times I've been broken, all the times I've gone through hardship, all of the times that I felt like I couldn't take anymore, the times where I felt like I was hanging on by a thread, barely hanging on. Any of you out there ever felt that way? That you were barely hanging on, like I can't do anymore. And then God shows up. And God reveals his glory even on your most difficult days. God shows his power even in your brokenness. And what was so fascinating to me about this tree is that even though it's snapped and barely hanging on, it's blooming new leaves because it's still connected to the tree. It's still connected to its source. It's still attached to its source. I had to go home and kind of study and figure out why this thing is growing new leaves. And I learned that when a branch snaps on a tree, the tree redirects its resources to the place where it's broken, to the point where even on a broken branch, new fruit can grow. Did you know that when you're broken, God is redirecting resources to your place of brokenness? That God is redirecting his grace, his mercy, his protection, his provision, his presence. He's redirecting his heavenly resources to those places where you're broken. But we have to stay attached to the source. That when we're attached to Jesus, when we stay connected to him and we feel like we're barely hanging on just by a thread, God is still showing his power, glorifying himself through you. You can still bloom even when you're broken. You can still produce fruit even when you're barely hanging on. Because when you're still barely hanging on, you're still hanging on to Jesus. Where are you broken today? In fact, better question, are you still blooming in your brokenness? I hope that you are, just like this tree. It's good to see you. I hope I see you next week. You know, schedule's been kind of wonky lately, but spread the word. Share Jesus wherever you can. You all are always wonderful. Looking forward to seeing you next week. God bless you. This is Gracepoints.